Welcome, everyone. Glad to see everybody here. Thanks very much for your participation in this legislative process. We do a better job when we hear from you, so thanks for being here. My name is David Tarnas, Chair of the House Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. This is a hearing of the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs on, it's Tuesday, March 21st, 2 p.m. here in Conference Room 325. And my Vice Chair, Greg Takayama, is here, and Member Representative Kanani Souza. The other members will be here presently. Those who are testifying today, I would like to ask if you could keep your testimony to about a couple of minutes, 2 minutes if possible. And I'll ask you to wrap up at that point. If you're testifying via Zoom, please keep yourself muted and your camera off until I call you, and then you can turn your camera on, turn your microphone on, give your testimony, and then when you're finished, you can mute yourself and turn off your camera. And if you're testifying on Zoom, please don't use any copyrighted or trademarked images behind you as a virtual background, because that kicks our video off of YouTube, and that would be a problem. So help us out by not using any trademarked or copyrighted background on your Zoom. Let's see, if you accidentally or if you lose connection, don't panic on internet. Just join and I'll try to fit you in after you return to provide your testimony. If power goes out here and anything, we have to cancel this or postpone it, we will post proper notice so you'll know when we're reconvening to consider these bills or make decisions. And as usual, if everyone would please conduct themselves with their finest manners. It's okay to disagree, but let's not be disagreeable. We all are here to do what's best for the people of the state and the INA. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Senate Bill 384 relating to access for disabled persons. This authorizes each county to adopt ordinances to enforce the design, construction, and signage requirements for the provision of accessible parking spaces, including the establishment of penalties for failure to comply with the ordinance. It also authorizes officials appointed by a county to enter the property of places of public accommodation to enforce violations of the county ordinances. First up, we have testimony and support from the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Please, I'll just ask you to come on up to the podium, and that's going to be my usual routine, is to ask you to come up to the podium, say something, introduce yourself. If you have testimony, you can briefly describe it. Don't go into detail, because everybody who's not here is watching you, and they want to see you, and the camera is looking right at this, and they can hear you when you speak into the microphone. So it's just to try to make us more transparent to the public so everyone understands. And one last thing, if you please could avoid use of jargon, technical terms, legalese, just use regular English. It'll help me understand, because I'm not a lawyer, and it'll help everyone who's listening understand so that we can all be more transparent. So with that, please, to you, State Council on Developmental Disabilities.
All right, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair. My name is Nick Brands with the State Council. I'm an intern. Just standing in support of our written testimony.
And you want to summarize it briefly? If you don't, then just, you can decline. But
I with the decline, Chair, I apologize.
Okay, no problem, no problem. I appreciate you being here. Next, we have testimony from the Disability and Communication Access Board. Well, yeah, come on the side there, and then you can use the microphone on this side.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair.
Keone, could you bring the microphone up closer to the gentleman? We can get that.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Please proceed, sir.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kirby Shaw. I am the Executive Director of the Disability and Communication Access Board, we're known as DCAB, and we're in strong support of this bill. It will allow the counties to enforce the requirements for accessible parking spaces for persons with disabilities. There is a statute right now, 29158, which calls for fines of non-compliant public entities. But the fact is that since the bill was made law effective in 2021, there's been no enforcement. So we thought this was a good way to have some enforcement, and we modeled it after 29173, which allows the counties to enforce parking at electric vehicle charging systems. So we thought that was a good model to follow. I would say that we're the proponents of this legislation, and when I ran it by the AG's office yesterday, they said that they would strike the reference to the Americans with Disabilities Act as it's written in the bill, because there's a jurisdictional issue there. I don't want to get too technical, but the counties should not be enforcing the Americans with Disabilities Act. However, in the description of Part 3, so the counties shall be authorized to enforce Part 3, which is the parking statute. There is a definition of parking, reserved parking space for persons with disabilities, which incorporates the ADA requirements for parking. So it's there already, so it's also almost redundant as well. So that would be our suggested amendment. We can give you wording with that change if you'd like, but we are in strong support otherwise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw. Appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony and support from Lou Erdicek from the Hawaii Disability Rights Center. And next, we have testimony and support from Kaili Swan.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I stand in support of this measure because people with disability needs parking closer to the structure so that they can get access to the building without fighting parking. Can you please pass this bill? That would be great. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. I appreciate your testimony. And finally, we have testimony and support from Melba Amaral. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 384? If not, questions, members? Nope. No questions. Thanks very much to the testifiers. Your testimony was very well written, so I think we all understand the measure. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 733 relating to Hawaiian culture. This requires the Office of Hawaiian Affairs to conduct a feasibility study on establishing Native Hawaiian cultural centers within the state. It requires the office to submit a report of its study findings and recommendations to the legislature and appropriates funds for said study. For this measure, we have first testimony and support from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Welcome. Pleasure to see you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Sylvia Hussey, Chief Executive Officer for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. We stand in support our written comments of support with amendments, and we're glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. And one other testimony we received was in opposition from Kenneth Conklin. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 733? If not, questions, members? I have one question from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, if I may. CEO Hussey, thank you so much for being here. One first question is, do you have in your strategic plan the intention to build anything similar to what's being discussed in this bill in the near or midterm future?
So the strategic plan includes broad categories of practices and policies and things like that. So culture, our foundation of Ohana, Mo'omehiu, and Aina. Cultural centers represent physical manifestations of that. So they're not inconsistent, they're just physical manifestations. So one of the amendments or of support is to the feasibility study as part of planning so that it can be actionable rather than a feasibility study to study and just put on a shelf. The actionable aspect of it is what we want to support. So physical places, place-based edifices are consistent with our strategic plan, especially the foundations of Mo'omehiu with the culture, and then Aina, being very specific in the Wahipana.
So you don't have a specific plan to build a physical structure, but it would be consistent with the guidance that your strategic plan offers?
It would also be consistent with what our communities have been asking. Each year, as we go to the neighbor islands, as the trustees go, every community asks for a cultural center that represents that area of that. And every community talks about the uniqueness of that area and the value of a culture center. So one of the, or several of the amendments that are there helps to align consistency in these edifices so that consistently they are gathering spaces, consistently they have the native plants and habitats. So one of the reasons that we've proposed some of the amendments is to put out those consistent themes regardless of where the edifices are so that we can align that concept.
Understood. And then final question, I'm loath to do another study. It seems like we should just go ahead and do something. And I think you would be the best to guide that. So we'll discuss it in decision making, but this did not start out as a study. This bill.
And we wanted to thank Chair Tam and his committee for hearing it first. And if we can think about study in terms of informing planning, then the study becomes more actionable rather than a study and then put on the shelf, which is definitely not our intention.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other questions, members? Vice Chair, please go ahead.
Yeah, just to continue the questions, many other cultural centers here in Hawaii, Japanese, Okinawan, Filipino, have all been built with largely community-based fundraising. Do you envision these cultural centers as being similarly funded, or do you see them as purely government-funded?
I think like anything community-based, right? So that's a shared kuleana of, in our philosophy of community-based, whether it's planning or community-based resourcing, it's community-based. So it wouldn't be, okay, Office of Foreign Affairs, you go build all these things. Then who's going to take care of it? Who's going to ensure the longevity of that? It really should be that community,
So it's
just
not-
like the Vahipana.
So
Yeah,
it's
so
not
it would be shared.
not necessary, for a government to be reliant upon for funding this concept.
It would be a very much government, private, community-based.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Other questions, members? If not, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Let's move on to the next measure, Senate Bill 44. This measure is relating to state water code penalties. It creates a minimum penalty of $50 for every violation of the state water code, raises the maximum penalty to $60,000 for every violation of the state water code, clarifies that each day a violation exists or continues as a separate offense, and requires the Commission on Water Resource Management to determine the amount of the penalty based on the circumstances of the violation. And importantly, it also appropriates funds for 2 full-time equivalent general professional positions in the Commission on Water Resource Management. And we have testimony from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Welcome.
Madam Chair,
Please,
Vice
Therese.
Chair, members of the committee, Alexa Dyke. I'm the legal fellow of the Commission on Water Resource Management, and the department strongly supports this measure, and we stand on our written testimony. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify in Senate Bill 44? If not, questions, members? Nope, thanks for your comprehensive testimony in writing. We have that. And just so everyone knows, we circulated the testimony with the members yesterday afternoon when we, after the deadline for submittal. So everyone has had that to read. Okay, let's move on. Senate Bill 298 relating to the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. It authorizes the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency to acquire any real, personal, or mixed property for immediate or future use, own, hold, improve, rehabilitate, sell, assign, exchange, transfer, convey, lease, or dispose of any real, personal, or mixed property acquired, and acquire by condemnation real property for immediate or future use. It also amends the definition of public lands to exclude non-ceded lands to which the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency holds title. On this measure, we have testimony with comments from the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
Aloha, Chair, members of the committee. I am Adam Weintraub. I'm here on behalf of Administrator James Barros, who is tied up with some training obligations in preparation for our spring hurricane drill. We stand on our written testimony offering comments on Senate Bill 298 SD1 HD1, and I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows who hasn't read it, you say in your testimony, although HIEMA has no, HIEMA is the acronym for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, says, although HIEMA has no plans to exercise such authority absent all appropriate executive and legislative oversight and transparency, this authority would provide HIEMA with additional flexibility to carry out its mission. And you talk about your existing headquarters complex is old. However, you say the timeline for development of any new facility remains uncertain. Do you want to add any more details than that, or is that accurate?
That is accurate. If the committee will indulge me a moment, part of the context for this is the ongoing discussion regarding the development of the First Responder Technology Campus at Mililani. There are a number of bills that are moving through the legislature that address various portions of that, including the design of HIEMA's proposed replacement state emergency operations center, which would go on one of the parcels at the campus, as well as some infrastructure and other design and engineering funding that would go to the entire campus. All of those await decisions by the legislature, but this bill, which was offered, I believe, by Senator Dela Cruz in connection with some of the larger plans for first responder, also opens the door for us to use these same approaches should first responder not be available and we have to move forward with another potential site to replace our existing Berkheimer battery facility. In addition, there are some elements of emergency response which could benefit from the ability to quickly obtain land, improve it, for mitigation type measures. So we see the flexibility that's inherent in this bill as a valuable tool for HIEMA's toolkit, regardless of ultimately the plans for First Responder Technology Campus.
Thank you for that additional information. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Aloha kako,
Aloha.
Chair, Vice Chair, and Member. Capson Poi, Interim Chief Advocate at OHA. We do stand on our written testimony offering comments. I did want to note OHA previously opposed this bill, but we're now offering comments and thank the previous committee for addressing our concern about the language on excluding the ceded lands. So
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Benjamin Sadowski with Unite Here Local 5. Next, testimony in opposition from Andrew Crossland, and testimony with comments from Marian Kapuniai. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 298? If not, questions, members? Representative Ganadin, please proceed.
To HIEMA. Hey, good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Nice seeing you again. We saw each other earlier at the Water and Land Committee hearing.
Yes, sir.
On a separate bill, I believe.
Yes.
Where are you testifying from?
I am testifying from Building 303, which is where our resilience branch is located, and our warehouse in Diamond Head Crater on the floor. It's the old National Guard warehouse building that was converted under the Obama Economic Development Program.
If memory serves me correctly, that was a building from World War I?
Actually, our World War I building is not currently occupiable. We are undergoing some asbestos and lead paint remediation there. So we have collected the folks who normally serve up at Berkheimer Battery, and we are all crammed into Building 303 at the moment.
All right, so you're in sort of temporary housing.
Yes.
And it seems like I counted at least 3, maybe 4 bills moving through the legislature presently to move your location.
They all address various aspects of that. None is sufficient in and of itself because there is it's a greenfield site up in Mililani that's under consideration. So there's one bill that's addressing infrastructure support. There's another that looks at design and engineering preparation work for our State Emergency Operations Center project. But there are numerous bills that are moving in parallel.
All right, so I'm going to ask a basic question. Why would we want all first responders in one place?
Well, sir, I think the First Responder Technology Campus name does us a disservice there. Not all first responders would be in one place. The training aspects and the coordination aspects for command and control of first responders would be located in hardened facilities that are all in this building that is out of the hurricane storm surge zone and the tsunami inundation zone. But the first responders themselves would be out in the field dealing with the emergency situation. Training would be conducted to ensure that we collaborate well. Our hardened infrastructure for communications would be located here, but to represent that this would be all of the police or all of the fire departments or all of the EMS workers centered at this location, that's not an accurate assessment. It's the command and control functions that help direct those resources where the emergency demands that they go that would be hardened.
So the Wahiawa facility is different from the Mililani facility?
Yes.
Okay, and which would you prefer?
I'm sorry, the other facility you mentioned was?
Well, we're talking about the large Avengers-style massive campus, or the Mililani facility that seems to be moving forward that has, looks like several bills to discuss its funding and its appropriation, and this bill, which would allow you to acquire the property for it. So what would HIEMA prefer?
At the moment, our focus is on the First Responder Technology Campus as a potential future site for the State Emergency Operations Center. That seems that it's the one within most achievable striking distance. The other proposal that you referred to, I'm not familiar that recently there's been any discussion of any other location for Hawaii Emergency Management's SEOC. But if it turns out that Mililani does not go forward, ultimately there will need to be an SEOC to meet the needs of the state. So the design work that we're working on could lead to another location if first responder does not come to fruition.
All right, and one more quick one. The first responder campus, it seems like the appropriation that we might have passed out of the House only pays for the road leading to the land where the campus might be built, but not an actual building. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that there are several bills which address different portions of the project. One of them is related to the infrastructure with the roadway, I believe sewer infrastructure, some of the electrical lines. That's one piece. There is another one, which I believe is the one we discussed at Water and Land this morning, that addresses continuing design work and schematic designs for the State Emergency Operations Center itself, but does not address construction.
Okay. All right.
We anticipate that if we move into the construction phase, at that point, we will seek additional funding through the federal government with some matching state funds. But this is all prelim work to establish scoping, schematics, and the needs of HIEMA, as well as the larger needs of the campus.
Pretty far out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Any other questions, members? If not, we'll move on. Thanks very much to the testifier.
Thank you.
Next, we have Senate Bill 786 relating to search and rescue. This requires government entities to seek reimbursement for all or a portion of search or rescue expenses for persons who require rescue after leaving a hiking trail to enter an area closed to the public or hiking on a trail closed to the public with a sign giving notice of the closure. On this measure, first up, we have testimony in support from the Department of Law Enforcement. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Hawaii State Fire Council. Testimony in opposition from the Honolulu Police Department. Please proceed. Go ahead, please proceed. Honolulu Police Department testifying in Senate Bill 786.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Major Shelley Paiva of the HPD Specialized Services Division. We stand in opposition of this bill and on our written testimony, and I'm here if you have any questions.
If you could briefly describe why you oppose this, that would be helpful.
Two main reasons. We believe that one, by establishing a penalty for to get us reimbursement for our losses, I guess you could say, or our costs for a search and rescue, it might delay the process of a person actually calling for help, which in the long run could make the rescue harder and more dangerous. And secondly, HPD itself at this time does not have a mechanism in order to, other than overtime costs and personnel costs, there's other costs we are not able to really get a solid dollar amount on, and we are not able to bill or accept payment at this time.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Maui Fire Department, also from the Honolulu Fire Department, comments, testimony in support from the Hawaii Firefighters Association. Welcome. Please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Commission.
Good
Sorry,
afternoon.
I'm not good at this.
Good afternoon,
Good
sir.
afternoon. Thank you. I stand here in support of this bill. Real quickly, you have our testimony. It's pretty clear. I would just like to say that for this bill has been in front of this legislature in several different forms over the years. This is the first time that we have broken away from the fire departments, and public safety in general, because this bill is focused on those that trespass into areas that are not meant for public use. When you talk about a rescue or any type of emergency incident, it's not an issue of whether it's simple or complex. We've lost firefighters in very simple incidents, such as what just happened on Maui, where we lost a firefighter in a very, very simple incident. The real issue is we need to reduce the number of rescues, because every rescue is dangerous. And that's really the goal here. What we've been doing in the past hasn't worked. If anything, we have more rescues. And these are really unnecessary rescues that shouldn't be happening. So the first goal really is to reduce the number of rescues, and we should be starting with those places that people are not supposed to be in to begin with and are purposefully violating the law. And I'm welcome to answer any questions.
Thank you. And you are Mr. Lee, is
Yes.
that correct? Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Todd Yukutake. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, committee, chair. I oppose SB 786 as police said it would create a risk to hikers and first responders if rescue is delayed because of urgency and other factors. I think there are other alternatives available. Increasing enforcement of current laws that close trails. Another thing is there's many volunteer outdoor groups that can provide aid to hikers, help first responders with searches, and provide hiking safety education to the community. I'm a new member of Oahu Search and Rescue. We're a volunteer search and rescue group on the island and other islands too. And basically the group has a bunch of volunteers. They're certified, they go through testing qualifications, they go through annual reviews, things like that. I was the leader for the Hawaii National Guard Search and Extraction Team, our basically search and rescue team for collapsed buildings and terrorist attacks. And they do a lot of the things that I used to do. The main difference was we were paid in the National Guard to do our jobs. These are all volunteers, so you can see their dedication to wanting to help people. But they can, like I said, they help lost hikers, lost hunters. They also search for missing persons. So they can help with some of the issues that you're trying to deal with. They can help save costs too to the state. They just need better support from the state and county to expand and do a better job with coordination with first responders being the primary one. But that's why I'm opposed to 786. Creates a risk, and I think some of these volunteer groups need further support from the state to help assist with the problem. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yukutake. And we received written testimony and support from Tony Frasciarelli and Jennifer Chiwa. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 786? If not, questions, members? I do have a question for Mr. Lee. Thank you so much for your testimony. This is the first time that in the many years that I remember hearing this measure or something similar, that we have gotten testimony and support from a state agency, Department of Law Enforcement, and then from the Hawaii Firefighters Association. I think we're all sort of getting tired of listening to this bill over and over and over again, and we're at an impasse. Even if I decide and recommend to the committee we move this forward, you know, I'm not sure if the measure will pass. What do you see as a path forward to try to address these issues? One, we don't want to deter people from calling if they need a rescue as soon as they need it, you know, so that you don't put first responders at risk. But this whole issue of, you know, establishing some sort of mechanism, enabling the counties and the State Fire Council to seek reimbursement in these situations. Well, how do you think is the best way for us to proceed? Is it the Fire Council working with the fire departments and your group to figure out a path forward? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I think at some point, you know, as far as if you go ahead and you charge, then you'll create some kind of mechanism to collect. I mean, that's just like everything else. The police, they have something in place to collect for tickets or you know, I mean, there's always something that you can do. But the real key is really creating a deterrent, and nothing has worked so far. That thinking that people are not going to call is really old school thinking. When you're in trouble, you're going to call. You're not going to think about money. People don't think about it when they call an ambulance, and they deal with it afterwards. So if you're in trouble on a hike or someplace in the mountain, you're going to call. And I think that is really old school thinking.
Okay.
And you know, we just got to get away from that. People are going to call because the alternative is you're going to die.
Yeah.
So that's just not logical thinking anymore. So the real key is to create a deterrent to try and reduce the amount of rescues. You know, our guys, they're not afraid to go. They're going to go. That's why I'm here advocating for them, because they're going to go. You know. So somehow we got to change the mindset of the public that it's not just about you going out there and taking your pictures up on the mountain and getting other people on social media to look at that and go, well, I want to do that too. You know, so we got to create a deterrent, you know, before more people get hurt.
And if I could ask, if you could suggest who should be involved in that conversation to come up with, you know, a mechanism and a way for us to approach this. I'm guessing Fire Council, right, because they represent all the fire departments.
Correct.
Your organization, because you represent the firefighters.
Yes.
And maybe the Department of Law Enforcement, since they're the state agency that says this is a good idea. Would those three entities be a good start?
I think that would be a good start, yes, for sure.
Okay.
Because all of the fire chiefs are on the State Fire Council.
Yeah.
So they would all be involved.
Okay.
But that would be a good start.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Lee.
you.
Appreciate you being here. Any other questions, members? If not, let's move on. Thank you to the testifiers. Okay, next we're moving on to Senate Bill 833 relating to the Wahiawa irrigation system. This measure requires the Office of the Governor to negotiate the state's fee simple acquisition of the Wahiawa irrigation system on the island of Oahu, authorizes and appropriates funds for the Department of Agriculture, Agribusiness Development Corporation, and Department of Land and Natural Resources to purchase, repair, and maintain the Wahiawa irrigation system and the associated spillway. The measure also appropriates funds for 4 full-time equivalent positions for the Department of Land and Natural Resources. First up, we have testimony with comments from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Welcome, Deputy Director. Floor is yours.
Chair,
Please proceed.
Vice Chair, committee members, Laura Ka'akua on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. The department stands on our testimony, offering comments and proposing amendments. And to summarize, we appreciate the importance of Wahiawa irrigation system, including Lake Wilson and its importance to agricultural irrigation, flood control, wastewater management, and public recreation in central Oahu. So we're willing to move this forward and explore the acquisition in collaboration with the Department of Agriculture and ADC. And we have both Ian Hirakawa from our land division and Tony from our engineering division in case there's more technical questions about dam safety or other issues. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony from the Department of Agriculture in support. Welcome, Director. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson Tarnas, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture. We stand on our submitted testimony in support of this measure and offer a comment as well. DOA appreciates the importance of the Wahiawa irrigation system, Wahiawa Dam and Lake Wilson Reservoir, to agriculture irrigation, flood control, wastewater management, and public recreation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Certainly. And you do also have a recommended amendment in your testimony? At least that's the version that you sent to us.
Oh, you perhaps have an older version. What was the amendment, sir?
It says, changing section 5 to read as follows. You want to delete until construction begins of the spillway and dam, and you just put in spillway and dam acquired by the Department of Agriculture, and then you struck out the rest of that sentence. I can show you.
Okay, I will stand by that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You actually, and the one you sent to us is the one that has track changes in it too, so we see what you took out and you're supposed to put back in, So anyway, I just, we'll work on that one. Okay, thank you. Next, we have testimony and support from the Agribusiness Development Corporation. Welcome, Director Nakatani. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jimmy Nakatani from Agribusiness Corporation. We strongly support Senate Bill 833 as is. We just want to emphasize to the committee that this is really important to agriculture, irrigation for the North Shore, and recreation. But I think what really, really most important, and I've been kind of following Lake Wilson for a long time, and I think it's the health and safety of the communities below. And I think this is something that we've kind of ignored for a long time. And it's not that it's in imminent danger right now, but I don't think we want to wait till we get to that point. So hopefully this committee supports this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support from Kathleen Pahinui, North Shore Neighborhood Board. Testimony in support from Micah Munikata, Ulupono Initiative. Welcome. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee. Micah Munikata here on behalf of the Ulupono Initiative. We'll stand in our testimony in support of this measure. Just to touch on a few things, Chair. Water is the lifeblood of agriculture. We support funding for critical agriculture infrastructure across the state, and the Wahiawa irrigation system provides that critical water access to local producers in the region. Having such an important system abandoned or sold to a private entity may have drastic ripple effects to local ag and communities alike. So we support keeping that water system within the purview of the state. I want to touch on one brief thing, Chair. The state has been looking at many different ways to tackle climate change and trying to find ways that we can adapt. We believe that irrigation and critical irrigation can be or is a part of climate change adaptation. In regards to climate change, irrigation systems mitigate the impact of decreasing rainfall, increasing frequency of drought, increasing temperatures. Irrigation can help to capture more rainfall during storm events so that water can be used in the future. In short, Chair, without water, there is no agriculture. This system is sorely needed, and if we can find a way to keep it within the state's purview, that would be great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Farm Bureau. Welcome, Mr. Miyamoto. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. I'd like to highlight, we stand in strong support of this and highlight what the previous speaker said. Let me rephrase that. No water, no agriculture. No agriculture, no food. This is a critical water source, not just for irrigation for our farmers and ranchers, but as you heard the previous testifiers, flood control, drought mitigation, wastewater treatment, even hydroelectricity. About 50 farmers are served by this water source. We're concerned that if it is purchased by another owner or another buyer, are they going to provide water for our farmers and ranchers? If so, at what cost? Is it going to be unaffordable? We've set many goals. Farm to school, we want to increase purchasing of local products. Farm to food bank, even today with our manufacturing day, the value-added products that our farmers are helping contribute to. We can't achieve those goals if the farmers don't have the water. In order to have farmers, we need the water. We urge the committee to pass this measure. This is a critical water source for roughly 50 farmers. We want to grow that number, but without water, we will not have farmers, we will not have agriculture, we will not have food. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, sir. And next we have testimony and support from the Dole Food Company, Mr. Daniel Nellis.
Chair,
Welcome.
Vice
Please
Chair,
proceed.
Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jared Gale. Dan Nellis is with me.
I'm Dan Nellis.
I'm coming from North Carolina, the Dole PLC headquarters in the U.S. and Dan, as you know, is the general manager of the Hawaii operations here in the state, and we stand strongly in support of this measure. Just want to echo everything that was said before us from the people that rose just now, and I won't repeat what they said, but we strongly support it. And maybe just to touch on one thing that I know could be a concern is the financial aspects of this. And one thing that we've explored as we were deciding what to do in response to the change in regulations that triggered our need to explore an option is what federal government money was available for upgrading the dam. And we spoke to our local federal congressional members, and essentially we're told that money is there, but it's only there if the state owns it. And so we know that money is available, but we can't access it. And there's, as the other gentleman just mentioned, that climate change initiatives are a source for potential funding as well. And so we believe that with these funds that are available, if the state owns the property, if the state owns the system, that it can be funded, and that those financial concerns can be alleviated. And so we just stand on our written testimony, echo the comments that were made before us, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Certainly. Thank you for being here. Mr. Nellis, did you want to add anything?
I just want to remind everybody once again, no water, no agriculture, no food. This system that we have is already primarily a public system. The Aquatics Division has recreation. The flood control that protects the lower part of the communities. Also, there's opportunity for, if the state owns it and invests further, they could possibly get into hydroelectricity. And if you have hydroelectricity, you could power a water purification system. And that's something that we need to think about for the future, because we know that pumping from the aquifer will not go on forever. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for traveling all the way.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony and support in writing from the Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii, David Arakawa. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 833? If not, questions, members? I have a question for Dole, since you're traveled all the way here. I appreciate, and in your testimony, if you could explain to the committee and the public who's listening, you described this as you're offering to gift, those are the words in your testimony, gift this to the state. Could you explain what that is, what you intend?
So we intend to transfer the property as a fee simple interest to the state.
And there's a number of parcels that are described in this measure. Which parcels are you speaking of?
All of the parcels that Dole currently owns, we would transfer to the state.
Okay, okay.
So we
there have been questions, and of course this is the fiscal matters are really the kuleana of the Finance Committee, and should this committee decide to move this forward, they would be asking these questions. But just as foreshadowing some of the questions that people will ask, someone said, well, if they're going to give this to the state, do they get a big tax write-off? Could you comment on that?
Sure. No, that's a fair question, and the no is the short answer. And the reason behind that is because this property has been owned for over 100 years. We've been in this state for a long time, and because of that, the tax basis that we have in this property is essentially zero. And so we're not going to be able to. The internal value to Dole is essentially zero because of that. So by donating something that has an internal value of essentially zero, we can't get a tax write-off from it.
Okay. And then last question, if the state does not purchase this, what would be your alternative plan?
The alternative, unfortunately, is if we can't give it to the state, if we can't find another buyer, then we would have to decommission it. And we're up against a little bit of a deadline here because of the regulations that have been, that are put in place where the decision is now. We don't have
Just so people know, the regulations you're referring to are related to the dam itself and the dam safety.
Correct, yeah.
The spillway of the dam needs to be upgraded to handle the new standard, which is possible maximum flood. And the standard is significantly more water than the standard that it was built for.
So that would require significant investment in order to bring it up to be in compliance with the current standards.
That's right. And we have estimated that to be north of $20 million.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
appreciate that. Any other questions, members? I have one question for Agribusiness Development Corporation. Mr. Nakatani, thank you for being here, sir. In your testimony, it's quoted as saying, we strongly believe the acquisition of Lake Wilson and the irrigation system should be a policy decision made and coordinated by the Office of the Governor to address and resolve any long-standing issues collectively. That certainly makes sense. This measure was not part of the governor's package. All the agencies are responding to this measure, but I'm not quite sure what the governor thinks about this. Could you enlighten me?
I think that if I could go back, I mean, they had that conversation with the governor.
If you could speak right into the microphone, that'd be
They
good.
really had, I mean, the old executives, I think they had this conversation with the governor about this, as well as I think Senator De La Cruz with the governor. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I'm not going to speak out of turn, but the governor does support this project.
Okay, yeah, I want to ask you the question, not the
he
company,
does,
but
yes.
since you work for
That's
ADC.
the reason why 3 agencies are here trying to resolve this whole thing.
Right, but this was not part of the governor's package. This is not a governor's proposal.
No.
As you say, this should be a policy decision made and coordinated by the Office of the Governor to address and resolve any longstanding issues collectively, and this
Right.
didn't sound like this started with the governor.
Well, I just wanted to point out that from the last administration, where the governor vetoed a bunch of money that was supposed to be for this project.
I remember.
They did put 3.5 in to do our due diligence. So that's the stage that the 3 agencies are in right now, doing due diligence right now.
Yeah.
With that money.
Yeah, I agree with your statement in the testimony. I'm just not clear what the governor thinks about this. So
Yeah.
if this does move forward, if this committee decides to move it forward to Finance Committee, I think it would be essential for us to hear from the 5th floor to know, because I agree with your statement in your testimony, and I'd like to actually see this policy decision made and be coordinated by
We'll surely note
Office
that
of the
and
Governor.
try to get that, note that to the next committee.
That'd be great. That'd be
All
great.
right.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Nakatani. Any other questions, members? If not, thank you very much to the testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 1254, relating to the Kaiwi Coast. This measure requires the Department of Land and Natural Resources to petition the Board of Land and Natural Resources to designate certain lands as the Kaiwi Coast State Park, and it appropriates funds. First up, we have testimony from the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Mr. Kurt Cottrell, Head of Division of State Parks. Welcome, please proceed.
Hey, good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee. I'm Kurt Cottrell. I'm the administrator for the Division of State Parks, and we stand in strong support of this measure. We've been working closely with the introducer on the Senate side, and it's gone through some morphs that we are now very comfortable with in terms of implementation. It is unusual to have a bill that has us petition the board, but to provide some clarification, one of the earlier versions amended our statute by changing the name, and none of our state parks are embedded in Chapter 184, and it's much more common for us to go to the Board of Land and Natural Resources when we do a name change. So that's why we kind of compromise on petition the board, because we also can't speak on behalf of the board in advance, but we will commit to going to the board recommending the name change. And then all of the covenants, we're in strong support of keeping it in its wild state. And as a commuter cyclist myself, I'm pleased that I'll be able to participate in establishing a pedestrian pathway that is adjacent to our state park and Sandy's, working with the city and county and Department of Transportation. And I think it's a good amenity to the Mauna Lua Makapu'u Scenic Byway by adding a pedestrian-friendly transit corridor, through our park area. So, and then we'll figure out the amount as it gets closer to the money, guys.
But you do say in your testimony you suggest $1 million to enact parts of this endeavor.
Yeah, I think it's mainly going to be the planning and design, because it's going to be a pretty heavy lift on designing a bike path of this magnitude. So we kind of put that in as a suggestion.
But only for planning and design?
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's going to be way more than that to build a bike path of this magnitude.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much,
Okay.
Mr. Cottrell.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony in support from Friends of Hanauma Bay, Ms. Lisa Bishop. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair. Vice Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you. Please proceed.
Yes, I'm Lisa Bishop with Friends of Hanauma Bay. I would like to stand on our testimony in strong support of Senate Bill 1254. Thank you for this opportunity.
Senate Bill 1254 is what we're talking about.
Right, the Kaiwi Coast.
Got it. Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Bishop. Next, we have written testimony in support from the Hawaii Bicycling League, from the Kaiwi Coalition, from Livable Hawaii Kai Hui, and from Andrew Crossland, Chris Abe. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 1254? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thanks very much to the testifiers. Next, Senate Bill 1286, relating to the Hawaii Community Development Authority. This measure increases options to build affordable housing by allowing the Hawaii Community Development Authority to conduct a pilot program to lease real property on one parcel in the Kaka'ako Community Development District for a term of 99 years and requires reports to the legislature. On this measure, we have testimony from Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Welcome, Deputy Director.
Good afternoon. Dan Wicker, Deputy Director, DBED. We stand on on support with amendments, non-technical amendment, changing one parcel to one redevelopment project as outlined in our testimony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Community Development Authority.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, and members of the committee. Craig Nakamoto, Executive Director of the Hawaii Community Development Authority. We stand in strong support of this bill. It is important to the Hawaii Community Development Authority in its efforts to try to produce more affordable housing. I echo Deputy Director Wicker's testimony that the language "one parcel" I think just needs to be clarified to either say one development project or one project, just because the pilot parcel that we want to do this project on, leasehold project on, is actually two contiguous parcels. So just want to make sure it's technically correct. So I think that changed to either one project or one development project will take care of that. The other clarifying change, committee members, is just to wherever it says like for sale, maybe we can say sale of the leasehold interest, just to be, again, clear on that. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much,
Available
Mr.
for
Nakamoto.
questions. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And next we have testimony with comments from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Aloha again, Chair, Vice Chair, and
Aloha.
members. Captain Poi, Interim Chief Advocate at OHA. We do stand in our written testimony offering comments. I do want to say to our HCDA friends, we do wish them success in these efforts and appreciate the legislature for addressing our concerns by including exemptions for ceded lands or the government and crown lands of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Mahalo.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 1286? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much to the testifiers. Next measure, Senate Bill 1391 relating to administrative penalties on public lands. This measure authorizes the Board of Land and Natural Resources to place a lien on property for noncompliance with certain administrative enforcement actions. On this measure, first up, we have testimony from the Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, committee members. Michael Kane on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We have submitted testimony in strong support of this bill. If I can take a minute and translate the legal language into plain English.
Yes, please.
So when we are talking about unauthorized structures encroaching on public lands, what we are talking about are private seawalls that are built on the state beach, either without authorization or which were given temporary authorizations which have expired and the landowners are refusing to remove them. When we talk about non-compliance with administrative enforcement actions, what we mean is the lien recordation will come into effect after my office has presented a violation report to the board, after the board has made a decision, after due process has been followed through either the courts or a contested case process, and if the landowner remains non-compliant. So we stand in strong support. We think it will help the department protect our natural resources and in certain areas protect beach access. I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane. And we have testimony and support from the Surfrider Foundation, Hawaii Region. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 1391? If not, questions, members? No thanks. I think we're all set. Thanks very much to the testifiers. Our next measure, Senate Bill 445, relating to pollution abatement. This measure increases civil penalties for the violation of various pollution provisions, establishes and appropriates funds for one full-time equivalent environmental health specialist position. And we have testimony and support from the Department of Health, Environmental Health Administration. You on Zoom? Please proceed.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Darryl Lum. I'm with the Department of Health Clean Water Branch. The Department of Health strongly supports this measure. The proposed increase to the maximum statutory civil penalties will deter potential violations of water pollution law and remove any economic benefit gained by violating the law. And the proposed appropriation to fund one full-time environmental health specialist with the Clean Water Branch will strengthen our ability to implement and enforce environmental law. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I will be available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lum. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 445? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thanks very much. Senate Bill 837, relating to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. This authorizes the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism to acquire and hold title to or contract to acquire by grant or purchase real, personal, or mixed property, to clear, improve, and rehabilitate, and to sell, assign, exchange, transfer, convey, lease, dispose, or encumber the property. Also to acquire property by condemnation. On this measure, we have testimony and support from the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Mr. Wicker, please proceed.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, DBED stands in strong support on this measure. We're currently putting together a strategic plan that focuses on economic clusters. Those include creative media and film, renewable energy projects such as the Hydrogen Hub, and the Food Innovation Network, which will consist of value-added product facilities on the neighbor islands. And doing an assessment of where these projects potentially could be located, the state does not currently own assets such as land or facilities, so this would give us the flexibility in acquiring through purchase to acquire those facilities and make the investments needed to diversify our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Agribusiness Development Corporation. Mr. Nakatani.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. Jimmy Nakatani from Agribusiness Development. We support Senate Bill 837. I just want to the discussion that this is not for agribusiness. I'm just supporting DBED's position. And I believe that there's other agencies within DBED that have those condemnation powers, just to remind the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have testimony in opposition from Benjamin Sadowski with Unite Here Local 5. Testimony in opposition from Rodney Funakoshi. Please proceed, Mr. Funakoshi.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, and committee members. This is testimony in opposition. I'm Rodney Funakoshi, formerly and now retired from the state, but I remain interested in good governance in the public interest. The bill has not received much attention, so I wish to share some of my concerns. First, lack of transparency and accountability. Every agency with land acquisition and development powers has a board or commission overseeing their actions to ensure protection of the public interest and public accountability. DBED has no such board or commission overseeing and approving departmental actions. Second, the bill's purpose is unclear, and it's unclear why DBD does need such broad authority that is not already provided by any number of attached agencies for similar purposes. A third, additional staff expertise and funding would also seem to be required, but this may duplicate or overlap with other state agencies. And further, my understanding is that attached agencies function independently, with DBED only providing administrative support services. And so my concern is whether DBED would be able to override the authority given to these agencies or exert additional authority over the many attached agencies under their umbrella. So in conclusion, there does not seem to be a pressing need for SB 837, and in the interest of good governance and accountability for public resources, I am concerned that it conveys too much unchecked authority. So I urge the committee to defer the measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Andrew Crossland and from Marion Kapuniai. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 837? If not,
Yes. Yes.
Please go ahead, introduce yourself and proceed.
Oh, my name is Teresa Harden. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members. I'd like to oppose SB 837 if this includes the condition or the situation where, based on a $5,000 civil fine, departments such as DPP is going to try to expedite and do a non-judicial foreclosure. I have to oppose if this includes that scenario.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Harden. Is there anyone else here that would like to testify on this measure? If not, questions, members? One question for Mr. Wicker. You mentioned a couple different projects, several different projects you want to proceed. It sounds like at least some of them, there is overlapping interest, for example, with UH, with the film studio, for example. Are you working with them now?
We are working with UH. They do have a potential interested, I think, party that wants to do a film studio on their parcel. This area that we're looking at is in Kalailoa, where it's currently on DOD parcel and Hunt Development. So building the synergy where currently Magnum is shooting is our focus. We are working in alignment. There is capacity for additional studios. The UH West Oahu parcel is a smaller parcel that can only accommodate half a dozen or less, where we are talking with the industry, they're looking at least a dozen facilities, or studio facilities. This also would include a facility on the neighbor island, Hawaii Island, potentially for the development of there. What we're hearing from the industry is that a film studio could be utilized on Hawaii Island. Some of the attached agencies, as previously mentioned, they do have the authority. Our projects include core program Creative Industries, as well as Hawaii State Energy Office. They do not have this type of statutory authority that will enable them to purchase. So rather than looking at a piecemeal approach of trying to ask for individual authority for each agency, collectively, as DBED is the parent department, we can work with our break the silos and work with our sister agencies as well as our programs if we get this.
Thank you. And then in terms of addressing the issue Mr. Funakoshi brought up about oversight, there being no board or commission that would oversee what you're doing, it's only the director and executive director. What's your comment on that?
I think that actually does raise a good point. There are, for like HHFDC, HTDC, HCDA, they do have boards. So if we could consider looking at potentially moving the bill forward and looking at what type of entity maybe we could set up in-house to allow that type of public interaction to come forward and testify when DBED puts forward a project.
Okay. This is not an administration bill, so you didn't come here with this plan already formulated, and it doesn't appear that this is a initiative of the new administration, because it sounds like there's still plenty of work that needs to be done for this to actually work. So if this is not the year to move forward a piece of legislation like this, what do you foresee as your next steps to try to address what you've identified as being a need within the department?
So two things. We worked with the legislator who introduced the bill to parallel our moving the needle strategic plan. And in presenting the plan, this is a way to help us achieve the next benchmark. If this bill does not pass, the projects such as the film studio would be delayed 12 to 18 months in our timeline. If we were to get this now, we're working on appropriation this year to acquire this potential parcel. So if we don't get this authorization, it would delay the acquisition, and the cost could rise on that parcel, or we would lose because it would go to market.
Assuming you get the appropriation.
Correct. Assuming we get the appropriation and we would get this type of authorization. Correct, Chair.
Lots of assumptions there. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's
Thank
part
you
of
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much to all of our testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 211 relating to the employees' retirement system. This ensures that employment, work, and pay eligible for the purpose of calculating retirement benefits includes retroactive reinstatement, retroactive rescission of suspension, retroactive pay differential, and back pay that are restored to an employee as part of an administrative, arbitral, or judicial proceedings. First up, we have testimony from the employees' retirement system. Tom Williams. Right on time, you get a phone call. Isn't that always classic, right? You're a popular guy.
I apologize for that.
Oh, don't apologize. I appreciate your patience. Please proceed.
Chair Tanis, Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee, I'm Tom Williams, the Executive Director of the Employees Retirement System, and I'm here to support Senate Bill 211, subject to the committee accepting the amendments that have been proposed. And these are amendments that have been proposed in coordination and in collaboration with the bill's sponsor, the City and County of Honolulu. When this bill was first introduced, we opposed it not because we didn't believe members who are reinstated following wrongful termination ought not be made whole, because we agree with that result. But what we were concerned about is the impact on the ERS tax exemption. We're a tax qualified plan. There are very strict technical rules as to how that program has to be administered. The bill did not contemplate those particular rules. We have since been working daily almost with the city and county to address their concerns and ours, and we believe the amendments that have been proffered today with our testimony address both theirs and ours. And so with that, we're in strong support, and I appreciate your consideration, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you being here. Next, we have testimony in support from the City and County of Honolulu Department of Human Resources. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas and members of the committee. I'm Nola Miyazaki, Director of the Department of Human Resources, City and County of Honolulu. We stand on our written testimony in strong support of the bill. As Mr. Williams has noted, we have been working very closely with ERS, and we have come to an agreement on the language in the bill that I believe achieves the objectives of all parties.
And that is the proposed draft that you've included with your testimony?
Correct, the amended version.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work on this and your collaborative work with ERS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have testimony and support from numerous organizations, Hawaii Firefighters Association, Hawaii Government Employees Association, State of Hawaii Organization of Police Officers, University of Hawaii Professional Assembly, United Public Workers, and Hawaii State Teachers Association, all in support. And finally, one separate support testimony from State of Hawaii Organization of Police Officers. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 211? If not, questions, members? No, I just want to acknowledge and thank again ERS working with the City and County of Honolulu to come up with an agreed upon proposed amendment to this. I appreciate the hard work you did. Thank you very much. There being no further questions, let's go ahead to the next measure. Senate Bill 435 relating to public works. This measure orders the person or firm found to be in violation of the state law governing wages and hours of employees on public works to be jointly and severally liable for the penalty, with the penalty increasing for repeat violations. Requires each notice of violation to contain the names of the person and the firm, and it defines a, quote, person for purposes of violations of the state law governing wages and hours of employees on public works and related penalties and suspensions. It requires the Director of Labor and Industrial Relations to suspend the person and firm under specified conditions. On this measure, first up, we have testimony and support from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, and members of the committee. My name is Kristen Lee, and I'm here for the DLIR Director. The department stands on its testimony in support of the measure and is available for comments and questions.
Do you want to summarize your testimony at all?
Sure. The department is in support of this measure because it seeks to eliminate the circumvention of the law by entities that transfer key personnel to a separate company and continue business under a new name to avoid the suspension from the work provisions under Chapter 104. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have testimony in opposition from Tim Lyons, the Subcontractors Association of Hawaii. Next we have testimony with comments from the General Contractors Association of Hawaii. Mr. Ryan Sakuda, good to see you, sir. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ryan Sakuda on behalf of GCA. We stand on our written testimony providing comments available for questions.
If you could, sir, just summarize, is your testimony comments sort of ambivalent about this, or do you think it's a good bill?
In general, we're for getting bad actors out of the industry. We're just not sure that this bill will accomplish that.
Okay. And finally, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Operating Engineers Industry Stabilization Fund Political Action Committee. Welcome, please proceed.
Hi, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Danny Kupchoy for the Stabilization Fund PAC. I will stand on our testimony and support. Thanks.
Could you explain why you support this, if I may?
Just, I think, echoing partly what the Department of Labor said and just trying to close this loophole where firm is getting violations, but they'll just move their key personnel to another entity and avoid ultimately having any punishment upon them, and acknowledging that, you know, the principal RME in some cases might not
RME
be
means?
Responsible Managing Employee.
Thanks, I'm just trying not to use acronyms.
Yeah, sorry. But, you know, ultimately that's the one that this all runs up to, and so we think that that's the most appropriate person.
The
to attach
responsible
violation.
managing entity, yeah.
If it was, you know, and they get 3 strikes.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the additional explanation. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in Senate Bill 435? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, thank you very much to the testifiers. Let's move on to the next measure. Senate Bill 389 relating to equity requires all places of public accommodation constructed after 12/31/23 and state building construction projects bid after 6/30/24 to provide one or more universal changing accommodations at each family restroom, provided that state building construction projects shall only be required to provide universal changing accommodations where feasible and cost effective, and it provides exemptions for hardship, makes a violation of the universal changing accommodations requirement an unlawful discriminatory practice, creates a private cause of action for a violation with defined remedies. On this measure, first up, in support, State Council on Developmental Disabilities. Welcome, please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Annabelle Doherty, an intern here on behalf of the council. We would like to stand our testimony in support, and I'd be happy to give a quick summary of that testimony.
Yes,
if
please.
needed. Perfect. So there really is a question about access. So the bill is changing facilities for people that obviously can't use the regular bathroom facilities, so adult-sized changing facilities. And it gives people with disabilities that require these facilities and the families a lot more access and movement. They don't have to plan out where they're going to go each day based on where they can actually use these changing facilities. And if it's, for example, in my limited research, I know even the state capitol doesn't have adult changing facilities. I'm sure everyone here appreciates having an accessible bathroom close at hand. So we're just trying to expand that access to these families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony with comments from the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, testimony and support from the Hawaii State Public Library System, testimony and support from the Disability and Communication Access Board. Mr. Kirby Shaw. Thank you for being here, sir. I wish everyone could drive as well as you.
I haven't chipped your paint yet. So, good afternoon.
Please proceed.
Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Kirby Shaw, Executive Director of the Disability and Communication Access Board. So DCAB is in support of this bill, and it's really a bill that recognizes that there are people who cannot use conventional restrooms. So it makes our places of public accommodation, our state facilities accessible to them. So, you know, whenever they visit and they have to use a restroom, there is a place for them to go. And so that's what this bill is all about, more inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your advocacy. Next, we have testimony and support from the Hawaii Disability Rights Center, Lou Erdachek. Testimonies and support from the Epilepsy Foundation of Hawaii. Testimony and support from Hawaii Family Caregiver Coalition. And testimony and support from Jerry Sugano. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Please proceed.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jerry Sugano. I supplied written testimony. I had an opportunity to provide testimony before this committee, so I just wanted to stand on my written testimony. Thank you very much.
Just your very compelling testimony. Could you just briefly explain why this is important to you?
Sure, it's absolutely important to us. I have a daughter who is 14 years old. She's over 100 pounds, and she's not able to utilize the infant changing tables that are in many restrooms, as well as here in the state capitol. Opportunity for universal changing stations to be put in public locations would enable her to go out in public more. We would be able to take her out of her wheelchair and transfer her easily onto a platform which she could change her diaper. Right now, we use the back of our vehicle, so when she goes out in public, we either have to rush, we change her in the back of our vehicle, or we just limit the distance in which we leave home, I guess. It's very important to our family, and we ask that as you govern over new public facilities, that you take this into consideration. We had the opportunity to see one of the these universal changing stations at the Hawaii or Daniel K. Inouye International Airport. So we know that there is one here in Hawaii, and we thank those that had the foresight to put that in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you tell us where it is in the airport? So
Sure,
I
it's
can encourage my colleagues to go visit it.
Sure, it's in the international terminal.
Okay.
In the family restroom.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. Thank you for sharing that. We have received written testimony and support from Sarah Kern, Jennifer Tevez, Shayna Metch, and Kaili. Kaili, is this Kaili on Zoom or no? No, guess not. Okay. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on Senate Bill 389? If not, questions, members? Seeing none, thank you very much to all the testifiers. Let's move on to the last measure on our agenda, Senate Bill 1230, relating to firearms. This basically sets up a system to implement the requirements in the recent Bruin decision from the U.S. Supreme Court that every state must develop a system for a concealed carry weapon license. And so this measure is a bill that sets up that system for concealed carry weapon license, identifies sensitive places, character, requirements to be qualified to get concealed carry weapon license, and it also defines penalties for not complying with provisions in the that are set up under this measure. And it does other things too, but that's the fundamental basis for Senate Bill 1230. On this measure, we have some people who are here testifying and some on Zoom. Just to note, out of all the testifiers, there's over 200 testifiers, testimony that was sent in, 114 in support, 90 in opposition, with 18 with comments. But let's go to those who have said that they would be here. First up, we have a representative from the Attorney General's office, David Day. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you being here, and since this is a highly technical matter that you've spent a lot of time on, you can certainly take more than 2 minutes, but if you could proceed and just try to explain it to us in plain English.
I'll do my best.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee, Dave Day. I'm Special Assistant to the Attorney General of the State of Hawaii, and Lopez. The Department of the Attorney General supports SB 1230. Now, for nearly 2 centuries, Hawaii has enacted and perpetuated reasonable, common sense gun laws intended to keep the people safe from gun violence. And this tradition prevailed over the centuries, as is reflected in Hawaii Revised Statute Chapter 134, which pertains to firearms and dangerous weapons. Last year, 2022, however, was a pivotal year for firearm regulation in our country. Among other things, prior to 2022, handguns were generally not permitted to be carried in public in Hawaii, whether concealed or openly, unless a person could demonstrate an urgency or a specific need. Prior to 2022, handgun laws nationwide, when challenged in court under the Second Amendment, were subjected to a legal analysis known as ends mean. This test involved a balancing of interests between citizens wishing to carry guns and the state's modern concerns framed within a modern context. But following the U.S. Supreme Court's 2022 case of New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, which will be referred to, I'm sure, repeatedly today as the Bruin case, states are generally required to allow law-abiding people to carry concealed firearms in public. But more than this, Hawaii has had to reassess its long-standing laws regulating firearms under a new legal framework set forth in the Bruin case, which introduced a new legal test, novel in all of law, concerning whether a regulation is consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Because of Bruin, SB 1230 reframes the state's robust firearms laws to exist in a post-Bruin landscape. Among other things, this bill updates provisions relating to the issuance of permits to carry concealed carry license or to obtain concealed carry licenses, and will establish certain sensitive locations where handguns shall not be carried. This bill requires the Department of the Attorney General to promulgate an annual report on licenses granted, which will provide statistics for understanding for this legislature and the community. The bill requires that a person keep a concealed carry license on his person when carrying a firearm and must disclose the location of a firearm at a public stop. The bill updates provisions on whether a person shall be disqualified from firearm ownership and establishes an express contested case review process which will best protect the Second Amendment rights of the people of the state. SB 1230 will help preserve the safe and welcoming character of our society while also respecting the exercise of Second Amendment rights. The Department of the Attorney General supports it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here and also sticking around for questions. That'd be great. Next, we have testimony with comments from the State of Hawaii Insurance Division, DCCA, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs.
Aloha, Chair Tarnas and Vice Chair Takayama, members of the committee. I'm Jerry Bump, Program Specialist, testifying on behalf of Commissioner Ito. You have our written testimony offering comments with one amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You want to just summarize briefly your testimony and your amendment?
Currently in the bill, it is stating that the commissioner shall determine when insurance is either suitable and commercially available. There's no definition of what suitable and commercially available is, so there's a slight change to that where the commissioner would then determine that it would become effective to have that insurance requirement once the commissioner determines that insurance is available that meets the minimum requirements that are listed in the bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Next, we have, you want to come up? You weren't quite sure whether you were going to testify or not.
Another staff member here to testify in front of it. Just give me a second here. Let's see, 12:30. On behalf of the director, I don't have it. We stand in support. Thank you.
Okay, I won't ask you to summarize it. Next, we have testimony and support from the Department of Transportation, Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, State Public Library System, Ah, it's always good to see you. Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, please proceed.
Yeah, on behalf of the Director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, we strongly support this measure. As state employees, we hope that the provision that includes state public workplaces as a sensitive location will stay in this measure. We, as public servants, do not want the risk of having firearms in our public workplaces and gathering places. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, testimony and support from the Hawaii State Public Library System. Testimony with comments from the Honolulu Police. Welcome, sir. Good to see you. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Major Eric Yosemori, Honolulu Police Department Records and Identification Division. We support the intent of this bill. We submitted a written testimony which we're going to stand by. We just have some concerns on the language as far as what might make it challenging for our officers to enforce. So, yeah, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. We also have received written testimony and support from the City and County of Honolulu Department of Transportation Services, Hawaii County Council Member Kagiwara, University of Hawaii, and we have testimony and support from Michael Goliot with the Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, testimony and support from Brady, Hawaii. Go ahead, please. Nope. Is Deb Nehmad on Zoom? Yes. Deb Nehmad from Brady, Hawaii. If you're on Zoom, please proceed.
Okay, I don't know if you can see me, but...
It's okay, we hear you, but please proceed.
My testimony is short. Thank you for having me. Thank you for considering this. You've heard where Brady is before. I think the only point I'd like to make is I know how hard the committees have worked on both. This committee has worked on HB 984, as well as now considering SB 1230. I think both bills are strong, and they could complement each other, and I would only hope that in conference you can kind of pick the best parts of both and come out with a wonderful product. So thank you very much for all your hard work on this, and aloha.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Jerry Ewan, Pu'uloa Rifle and Pistol Club. Please proceed.
Aloha, I'm Jerry Ewan from the Pu'uloa Rifle and Pistol Club. I strongly oppose this bill. The intent is for public safety, but it really does nothing to increase public safety. The intent of concealed carry is deterrence against crime. This bill does not affect the criminal. It only affects the lawful concealed carrier. It tries to make the concealed carrier responsible for liability by insurance. The criminal doesn't care about insurance. He commits the crime. He's not going to actually be financially or even, well, he might be legally liable, but he's not going to be affected by this bill. He doesn't care. So I stand on my testimony. This is a bad bill. Please don't push it forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ewan. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Jamie Detweiler, Hawaii Federation of Republican Women. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Tarnas, Vice Chair Takayama, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. The Hawaii Federation of Republican Women stands in strong opposition of SB 1230 SD2. And as many others have said before, but we can't say it enough, it is in violation of our Second Amendment right. Additionally, on my written testimony that I submitted, I do have a minor correction on point number 4 with regards to the citation of 18 USC. So it should read 18 USC 922 Yankee 2. That is a reference to an ATF law, which does have strict restrictions on aliens who are authorized to carry a firearm. I'm concerned about this too, because you're placing restrictions on the US citizens, law-abiding citizens who follow the law. And again, the intent is to protect innocent people. And in addition to that, are these aliens subject to the same rigorous background check that the rest of us are subject to? Do they have to buy insurance? Do they have to be checked for their temperament? Also, on the last point and the most important point, let's not forget about the victims of violent crimes. And I'm here to advocate for them. Had we had someone who was licensed to conceal carry at the Walmart incident here in Mililani, where I've lived for over 35 years, that incident could have ended much better for the victims involved in that. People don't do a follow-up story on this mother of four, this married mother of four who had severe compound fracture injuries to both legs. And, yes, that person used his vehicle as a weapon, but had there been a concealed, trained, licensed gun carrier there, the outcome would have been different. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have testimony and support from Ilima DaCosta. Next, we have testimony and support from Crystal Lopilato. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Crystal Lopilato, and I serve as Policy Counsel for Everytown for Gun Safety. Testifying in support of SB 1230 today, this bill is essential for keeping Hawaii communities protected from the risks imposed by the Supreme Court's dangerous decision in the Bruin versus New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case. As Mr. Day described, Hawaii state law had strong criteria that had to be met before a person could be issued a concealed carry license. An applicant had to demonstrate that they had an exceptional case and a specific reason to fear injury before they were given a license to carry a hidden loaded gun in public. When the Bruin decision struck down New York's good cause requirement for concealed carry permits, the Supreme Court also invalidated Hawaii's exceptional case requirement, along with laws in several other states. Our team at Everytown has been working closely with the states whose laws were impacted by the Bruin ruling, and we've identified several key safety gaps that need to be filled in Bruin's wake. One, states like Hawaii now need to create detailed eligibility requirements for who can carry guns in public, with the goal of ensuring that anyone licensed to carry a gun in public has received proper safety training and that applicants have been carefully vetted under objective standards. Number two, we need to see uniformity in how applicants are vetted across the state, making sure that issuing authorities are consulting the full scope of appropriate sources to ensure the applicant won't pose a public safety risk if allowed to carry a gun in public. And three, we need to see thoughtful delineation of where concealed carry license holders can and can't bring guns in public, including making sure that guns aren't allowed in places where they never belong, like playgrounds, bars, and government buildings. This bill meets all of those needs, and it's written to be consistent with the constitutional boundaries of the Supreme Court's decision in Bruin. It includes robust due process procedures for license denials and an opportunity to appeal those decisions. We urge your support of SB 1230. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony and support from Rachel Logan. Testimony and support from the Hawaii Bankers Association. Testimony and support from Angelina Mercado, Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Please proceed.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. I'm Angelina Mercado, the Executive Director of the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we submit testimony in strong support of this measure and have respectfully recommended a couple of recommendations that further aligns it with HB 984 that recently passed out of committee last week. Specifically, our amendments address the fact that many of our domestic violence services are actually conducted on in facilities that are not just in domestic violence shelters. And this is really important because domestic violence victims, especially those who are in a custody situation where they're court mandated to do visitation with their abusive partners, are really concerned about those situations where they may end up having to do a custody exchange, or where they may have to pick up their children from a supervised visitation center. So this would cover that area specifically, as well as any other facilities where domestic violence services are facilitated. We're really concerned because survivors of domestic violence are 5 times more likely to die from gun violence if their partner has access to firearms. The trend is worsening for women in the 10-year period between 2008 and 2017. Intimate partner violence, homicides of women involving guns has increased by 15%. Adults are not the only victims. As I've indicated in our written testimony on March 4, 2022, just over a year ago, a father under a restraining order killed his 3 daughters during a court-ordered visitation at a church. So we believe that we have to create safe places where survivors of domestic violence are free to heal, seek help after traumatic events. Prohibiting the public carrying of firearms in these spaces is paramount to the creation of healing in this environment without the threat of harm, re-victimization, or re-traumatization. Again, we are in strong support of this measure with our recommended amendments and are happy to address any questions you may have. Aloha.
Aloha, thank you very much. Testimony from Andrew Roberts. Is Andrew Roberts back? Mr. Roberts, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Andrew Namiki Roberts for Hawaii Firearms Coalition. We keep hearing that Hawaii's had a history of 200 years of prohibiting the carrying of firearms in public. In this, we seem to forget that security guards have been in our state walking around with for decades. These people go through the same background checks that we go through to concealed carry as private citizens. It was recently brought to our attention that the Honolulu Police Department has been issuing open carry licenses for decades to security guards with firearms that they don't even own. The business owns the firearm. The security guard has issued that firearm. It's not registered to them. This is illegal. It's an illegal transfer of a firearm. So if we're worried about public safety, why haven't we banned security guards decades ago? Why have we been allowing them to walk around with unregistered firearms for decades? This bill serves no purpose for public safety. Many of its provisions serve only a single purpose, which is to create a delay, create an obstruction for firearms owners who are going through background checks, are doing the mental health checks, are going through all of the policies and procedures that the police departments are saying that we have to go to show that we are safe, that we are able and capable of carrying firearms in the public. But now we're saying that you've gone through these steps, but you're still not safe. With regards to the domestic violence, I don't think that they realize the consequence of this. We're saying that these people need to be protected in places where domestic violence survivors meet. Now you have to publish a list of all of these places where these people meet. Because if you're going to have a place where we cannot carry a firearm, we need to know exactly where these are. Is the government ready to provide a list of every single government building, every single place that we can't carry firearms? The logic behind that is crazy. This is something that cannot occur. The police department are saying that this law will be near impossible to enforce, and it will only come into effect after a person has committed a crime. This is going to be a secondary charge of carrying a firearm. You can walk around with a firearm all day long and nobody will be able to tell, because that's the idea of concealed. We're confusing concealed and open carry and criminal carry firearms and law-abiding public citizens. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Jason Wolford. Please proceed.
Oh, thank you. I'm testifying in strong opposition to this bill. Besides some of the people have already spoken about the problems with this bill and the challenges of it, I don't understand this bill when it requires all the background checks and things to do for a concealed carry permit. The police department is currently swamped by this. Here in Maui, they're only open 4 days a week. Now, the additional requirement of them to interview people that you give for personal references, and as well as this bill has an interview process for this. It's very subjective and not objective things for people to meet in order to obtain a permit. I think it's wrong. I don't understand what other constitutional right that you exercise that you would also have to purchase insurance. If you go to church this Sunday to pray, Do you have to have insurance to go pray? This bill requires you to purchase insurance just to exercise your rights. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have testimony in support from Lee London. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Michael Rice. Please proceed.
Aloha. I have a few questions for the board.
Actually, we're not going to be able to answer your questions,
I
but
know,
if you could just testify and tell us your thoughts about it, that'd be best.
I ride the bus, and under this bill, I'm going to have to, I can carry, I just can't carry on the bus. How am I going to get my gun from here to here in a lockbox without freaking people out? Because I need to store it unloaded, and that's going to make a lot of noise. Everybody at the bus stop is looking at me right now. Some people are criminals are thinking, hey, I can get a free gun if I beat up this fat howler. Some people are already calling the police on me because I'm a mass shooter now, even though I'm complying with the law or trying to. And same thing in my car. If I'm doing this in my car, somebody is bound to see me because I need to remove it from where it's holstered. And every time I do an administrative action on this firearm, there's a chance of it going off. Due not to negligence, but poor design perhaps, or any other reason. I also, as Andrew briefly mentioned, how does this actually protect anybody except for after the fact? After somebody has already pulled out a gun in the school and shot up the place, or went into a business and shot up the place, or got pissed off because somebody told them to take off their mask and shot up the place. And, you know, and most of these places cannot be secured. Look at Makaha Beach Park this past couple weeks. They just had a shooting down there. 3 guys showed up, tried to rob somebody. The guy ran away. They put out their guns, which I can guarantee you were not registered, were not permitted, and did not have any kind of, you know, they got out of the back of somebody's truck in Kalihi. They didn't go down to a gun store to buy it. They robbed the guy, shot the place up. I'm steeply surprised they didn't, you know, actually hit anybody during this shootout as the guy tried to escape. So what does this accomplish for actual safety? As I said, there's just so many things wrong with this bill, and it won't survive a constitutional challenge and a lawsuit. So all you're doing is wasting time and money. I stand the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Michael Rice. Next, Marcus Tanaka. Marcus Tanaka, please proceed.
Okay. Hello. This is so I'm going to ask you guys this. This is rhetorical. Don't answer.
Is this? Are you in support or in opposition?
Oh, I'm in opposition to this bill.
Okay, please proceed.
So rhetorical question. So I want you guys to replace the word firearm with any other right protected by the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Okay? Imagine that I don't have freedom of religion. It's automatically banned at all sensitive places plus business establishments unless I get approval from that business. Okay? So it's common for people to wear a pendant around their neck of, you know, their religious, whatever religion they want to practice. They can't do that at a bar. They can't do that at a business unless they get approval. They're automatically banned from doing that going into a bank. That's freedom of religion. Apply the same standard to other First Amendment rights, say freedom of speech. I wrote my testimony the other day in one of your sensitive places from my smartphone, because with smartphones, you can access the internet anywhere. Imagine I couldn't express my freedom of speech unless I got permission from that establishment, or it was totally banned. I had to go outside on the public sidewalk to do it. Okay? Same thing with other freedom of press. Say someone wants to write a story about whatever, and you know they're a journalist and they can't do it at any of these places. Okay? That's First Amendment. Let's say this applies to the Fourth Amendment now. You know, I'm at somewhere and law enforcement comes in and, you know what, I don't have the right to not be searched. They don't need reasonable cause. They can just frisk me all they want just because they feel like it, because my right is automatically denied unless I'm given permission from the owner. So that's why I ask you guys to ask yourself that question. Would this stand up to any other right? Why is the Second Amendment always treated like a second-class right, which was mentioned in the Supreme Court ruling? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Lori Fujimoto. Next, testimony in opposition from Noella Vaughn. Next, testimony in opposition from Lindsay Kimura. Next, testimony in opposition from Scott Shedko. Next, testimony in opposition from Teresa Hardin.
Hi, thank you. I'm here. Thank you, Council, members, for allowing me to speak today. I do oppose SB 1230. You know, my basic instincts are that the majority of people are not gun people. And so the thought is someone having a gun is a danger. But the truth is, the criminals, if the criminals are the only ones with the guns, that is what is dangerous. In states that have, let's say, constitutional carry, criminals know that chances are, if they're going to go out and create a crime or mass murder or some craziness like that, they know that in those states that is a good chance that an average day citizen who is concealed carrying or open carrying in some of those states would be there to stop them and to stop them from creating or executing their plans as they had. I think that we live in a very isolated place, and Hawaii has had the luxury of that for a long time. But since 2020, a lot has changed. I grew up with my father was a sheriff, and I had a bunch of cops and military in my family, so I was raised around guns, and I was not scared of guns. I've lived in Hawaii since '96, and I never thought that I needed to have a gun up until 2020, before COVID, believe it or not. It was Hibiscus Road. My business is property management, and Hibiscus Road changed things. I just want to say that there's a time and a place. I'd like you to think about the Texas massacre. There's been a few involved where people came into churches and started open fire. And a lot of people were rescued and saved because of concealed carry. So I think that it's important that we all recognize the criminals are the ones not following the rules. All of these rules and restrictions are being put on good, law-abiding citizens who don't want to use their weapon unless they're put into a dangerous situation, and either to protect their own lives or someone else's. And you cannot say that we haven't had these type of incidents. If you think about the Xerox situation that we had,
Thank you.
Could that have been different?
Could you summarize, if you would, please?
Yes, I think that guns definitely. There are places that they shouldn't be allowed, courts, state buildings, but I believe that to the degree of what this bill and what the attempt to do is harmful in general to the populace.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony, Ms. Hardin. Next, we have testimony in opposition from Todd Yukutake. Thank you for your patience, sir. The floor is yours. Please proceed.
Aloha, Chair, Committee. Todd Yukutake, oppose SB 1230. I think as Michael Rice said, that YNI shooting recently, 3 people shooting the park there at night, explains how this bill doesn't work. There's already laws against murder while shooting. They're probably felons or prohibited persons and didn't stop them from having a gun. But our current laws and SB 1230 stop good people who are at the park from defending themselves from those 3 thugs. And that's how this bill is harmful to the public and to gun owners too. In my testimony, I wrote about the unconstitutionality of it, how it hurts people, how it hurts gun owners. I stand on that part of my testimony. It's been covered a lot. I do want to cover something that hasn't been covered, which is basically the confiscation of firearms for minor crimes. On page 20, under the definition of crimes of violence, it adds the crime of harassment to gun prohibitions, excessive speeding for reckless endangering, and even some minor gun offenses. Harassment could be nonviolent. It could be a heated argument. It could be calling names, unwanted phone calls. Kind of sounds like politicians sometimes to me. It could be minor forms of violence too. A woman slapping a man on the face. That's harassment. A little pushing someone to a side. That's harassment too. So these are things you shouldn't do, but it doesn't demand banning someone from possessing guns. Same is true for reckless endangering. That could be excessive speeding, I think probably like drifting, some other things. Bad things to do, but not to the extent where you ban someone's constitutional right. And there's probably a lot of people like this. Probably police officers, I'm sure, have harassment charges on them. Security guards, other people who use firearms for their jobs are going to lose their jobs because they're prohibited persons now, if this passes. Hunters, competition shooters, probably a lot of everyday people made mistakes in the past, and now their guns are going to be confiscated because of that. Let's see.
If you could pick out your highlights, that'd be great.
Okay. Just a few other things I want to go over. This bill is very similar to HB 984. Just remember, you took out the insurance requirements from that bill. We also ask you minimize this bill. If you are going to pass it, limit the sensitive places to government buildings, schools, other places the Supreme Court said were allowed. Make it a 4-year carry license statewide. That reduces the manpower requirements for the police department to process this. I know they're shorthanded. Also relieves gun owners of the burden of applying all the time. And time is money for us. Please consider those things and either oppose this or make it a very minimal bill with some of those changes. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yukutake. That's all the people that have said they would like to be here or to testify in person or over Zoom. Is there anyone else here wishing to testify on this measure? Anyone on Zoom to testify? If not, questions, members? I have a question for the Attorney General, Mr. Day. There's concern among some of the testifiers that this would be a violation of the Second Amendment rights. Could you please address that?
Sure. So to address that question is quite complicated because this bill has a lot of different facets, and the way that the analysis has changed since 2022 is very novel and new. All of this is essentially kind of very novel and ultimately one that relies on historical analysis. The way that the Department of the Attorney General has defended suits in court since the Bruin case has changed dramatically. And one of the reasons why is because it requires this in-depth historical analysis. And so when looking at these issues, ultimately we look at the old history and the history that's allowed to be, or that's available on a given regulation, and then determining whether or not something is analogous or dead on point or what the court said was analogous. Since that time, there have been, I have a binder about this thick of cases that have come out. Most of them have come out in favor of the fact that a given regulation is constitutional. There's been maybe a handful, some of them have been outrageous, that have come out in the district court, which have come out otherwise. But I'd like to point out two specifically that just came out in the past week. The Southern District of New York came out in favor of the sensitive places regulation, and just for the record, I have it right here. It should be right here. The case is called Frey versus Negrelli. It's out of the Southern District of New York. Southern District of New York is among the most well-respected in the country, and in that they found that basically sensitive place laws concerning areas where recreational, commercial, other activities where large people gather is supported by a history and tradition test of the Constitution. That's the Southern District of New York. And then just today, New Jersey Appellate Court, and for the record, the case is called In the Matter of Appeal of Denial of MU's Application for a Handgun Purchase Permit, held that certain character assessments with respect to handgun permits is constitutional under Bruin. So ultimately what we have here is one where we're plowing new ground, but ultimately, everything in this bill is something that we believe we can defend.
Okay, and then last question. I know that the Attorney General had proposed HB 984, and that was the measure that we moved out previously from the House to the Senate. When you worked on that bill, could you explain to me the basis for your crafting of that in terms of best practices from other states, and also on the concurring opinion that was written by Justice Kavanaugh and Roberts? Could you briefly explain that?
Of course. And so this was after the Bruen decision came out, the Attorney General promulgated a published Attorney General opinion, which was, I believe, 2202, which was an opinion that basically kind of immediately adjusted in light of Bruen. But after the Bruen opinion, it became apparent that some things needed to be absolutely adjusted to basically reframe in light of Bruen. This analysis that we undertook was extensive. It involved the participation of numerous groups. I believe every single police department, every single prosecutor's office in the state was consulted on this matter. It was one that involved numerous individuals from our department, including some of literally some of the best and smartest people in the state. Ninth Circuit law clerks we're talking about who worked on this bill. What we then came up with is we looked at the laws of other states. We based it on laws from California, New Jersey, New York, various jurisdictions, even Texas. We looked at those laws that had been enacted that we believed would be appropriate. It was a painstaking analysis, and one that we're extremely proud of that we put forward.
Thank you very much. Members, other questions on this measure? If not, thank you very much, and thank you to all the testifiers on all of the measures today. These are all important measures. This last one is certainly one that people have some very strong opinions on, and I appreciate everyone sharing your opinions with us today. There being no further bills before us for consideration, let's go back. We have all our members here. We can go back and begin decision-making on these bills. Okay. Okay, first up, Senate Bill 384. My recommendation is to move out of House Draft 2, so I'd like to amend this to incorporate the suggestion from Mr. Shaw that we strike reference to the American with Disabilities Act to make sure that we weren't out of compliance there, since the counties don't have that authority. So we'll just strike that reference and move out an amended bill with that one change. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 384 SD1 HD1 with further amendments, Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ganadin.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Hashimoto.
Aye.
Representative Ichiyama.
Aye.
Representative Ilagan.
Aye.
Representative Kong.
Aye.
Representative Mizuno.
Aye.
Representative Souza.
Aye.
Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. On the next measure, Senate Bill 733, my recommendation is that we should defer this measure, only that I think everyone is of the opinion that we've done numerous studies, and I think if we're going to do something to create a Native Hawaiian Cultural Center, we should just move ahead and do planning and design work as one would with any other major project. And once we have the plans and design completed, then come in for construction financing for it. If we're going to pay for it in part by the state and in part from the private sector, I think we need to work out that plan. I would look to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for some leadership in this regard, but I think this bill, as it is currently in its current state as a study, is not really addressing effectively what we need to address. So my recommendation on this measure is to defer. I have spoken to the introducer, and so he's fully aware and supportive of this decision. Okay, moving on to Senate Bill 44. My recommendation is to pass out an amended bill, a House Draft 2, page 4, line 13. I would say that we just need to clarify that the positions are to, quote, to enforce compliance with the state water code, just so it's clear what these positions are for. That's my recommendation on this one. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 44, SD2, HD1 with further amendments, all members being present. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On Senate Bill 298, I think this measure is premature. I think when the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency finds that they really need a measure like this because they have a particular plan in mind, a particular need in mind, then I think they can certainly come back. But it sounds like this, from their description, that they're not quite ready to even use this, but they might use it if they were given the authority. And I think that's not quite enough of a compelling reason for the legislature to grant this significant authorization for an entity like this to acquire, sell, exchange, transfer, lease of real property. So I would look, or condemn real property for its use. So I would look to HIEMA to continue their efforts, both in terms of this campus that they're working to build or relocating their headquarters. And if they need something like this, I would urge them to work with the governor's office and come back with something that should be an administration bill. They should really take the lead on that. So my recommendation is to defer Senate Bill 298. Next, on Senate Bill 786. On this one, I recommend that we move out of House Draft 2. This is the first time that since I've been around, that we actually have testimony in support from a state agency, Department of Law Enforcement, and in support from the Hawaii Firefighters Association. While the State Fire Council and the state and the county fire departments continue to be in opposition, I think we need to figure out a solution to this. I'd like to make technical amendments and in this and move it out as a House Draft 2, but I want to include in the Standing Committee report that this committee would strongly urge the Department of Law Enforcement and the State Fire Council and the Hawaii Firefighters Association to work collaboratively to develop a plan and recommend legislation to address this issue and report back to the legislature next session. And we would put that into the Standing Committee report, but we'd move out an amended bill HD2 with technical amendments for further consideration in the House. That's my recommendation. Any questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 786, SD1, HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On Senate Bill 833, relating to the Wahiawa irrigation system, on this measure, my recommendation is to move out of House Draft 2. This is a very important measure. Yes, it potentially could have significant public benefit if this transaction is approved by the legislature. But I really would want to make sure that this current administration is fully in support of this. This isn't just a legislative initiative. Because I agree with the testimony from the Agribusiness Development Corporation that we really need to have the leadership of the governor to decide that this is important and to move forward with this. This isn't just going to happen because, you know, a certain number of legislators think it's important. With that in mind, I'd like to move out of House Draft 2, and my amendments are on page 2, line 13 to 16. We should add the words Sustainable Hawaii LLC or the appropriate owner. Added to the list of entities the governor shall negotiate for the acquisition of the Wahiawa irrigation system. I would also like to make technical amendments needed for clarity and style. I would like to also incorporate the Department of Agriculture's recommendation in their testimony. And then I would also like to include in the Standing Committee report the recommendation of the appropriation amounts, $21 million for the Department of Agriculture to repair and expand the spillway and bring it into compliance with all relevant dam safety requirements, $5 million for the Department of Agriculture to acquire a fee simple interest in the spillway, $800,000 for the Agribusiness Development Corporation to manage and maintain its acquired portion of the Wahiawa irrigation system, and $500,000 for the establishment of 4 full-time equivalent positions for the Department of Land and Natural Resources to manage and maintain its acquired portion of the Wahiawa irrigation system. And then finally, I would like to include some language in the Standing Committee report that expresses my serious reservations whether or not this is an appropriate use of public funds. And so the judgment about that really is the kuleana of the Finance Committee, so I would urge the Finance Committee to do that due diligence and make that judgment. So with that, I would like to move forward that amended measure as an HD2. Questions or concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 833 SD2 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Senate Bill 1254, I would like to recommend we move it out with House Draft 2 with technical amendments and add into the Standing Committee report the request that DLNR has for $1 million for planning and design only for this. That's my recommendation. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 1254 SD2 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, Senate Bill 1286. I would like to recommend we move out an amended version of this bill, House Draft 2, and I would like to include the amendments as recommended in the testimony from the Hawaii Community Development Authority in their testimony. With those changes, questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 1286 SD1 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Next on Senate Bill 1391 relating to administrative penalties on public lands. I recommend we move this out with the House Draft 2 with technical amendments. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 1391 SD1 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, Senate Bill 445 relating to pollution abatement. My recommendation is to move this out as is. It's got a defective effective date to encourage further consideration. This moves on to finance. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 445 SD2 HD1 passing as is. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Next measure, House Bill 837 relating to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Much like the earlier measure, Senate Bill 298 relating to Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, I think this measure, Senate Bill 837, is premature. While I heard the Deputy Director of DBED say that they've got plans and they could use this, sounds like that there's also alternatives to those plans, like working with the University of Hawaii for their film studio. And I think that the Deputy Director is wanting to have DBED operate like a private developer, and they're really a public agency, and we need to remember that. These are use of public funds, and there really needs to be oversight, much as in the DLNR, you have a board of land and natural resources that oversees that. There's that public oversight through all those publicly noticed meetings. DBED doesn't have anything like that. There is no board, no commission, no oversight in that way. I'm concerned about them being basically exempt from Chapter 171, and I think that there are public trust resources when we're using public money to purchase land, and so I have concerns about this measure. But if DBED decides they really need this and they have a plan for it, they should come back and talk to us about it. If they got projects they want to do, come back for planning and design money, and if they need to acquire property, you know, there is a process through getting capital improvement project financing to do that, but it's on a project-by-project basis. So that's my recommendation. I would like to defer Senate Bill 837 at this time. Moving on, Senate Bill 211, relating to the employees' retirement system. I want to acknowledge the work that the City and County of Honolulu has done with the ERS, the Employee Retirement System, and I would like to adopt the proposed amended bill included with the testimony from the City and County of Honolulu as our HD2, with the one change that it would have a defective effective date of June 30th, 3000. And I would note for the members that the Employee Retirement System has agreed with this proposed HD2. So that's my recommendation. If you're, that measure is actually included in the testimony from the City and County of Honolulu. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 211 SD2 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Senate Bill 435 relating to public works. On this measure, I would like to modify this so there would be House Draft 2. I want to make one technical amendment on page 1, line 14, page 2, line 5, add the words assess and before the word order so that it's consistent with other parts of it, of the bill. And I would like to change the effective date to June 30th, 3000. With those measures, I'd like to move it out as a House Draft 2. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 435 SD1 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. Next, moving on to Senate Bill 389 relating to equity. On this measure, I would like to recommend we move it out with an amendment to add a severability clause because there was some concern that there may be some issues that part of the bill may not withstand legal check and might be held unconstitutional. So I want to put in a severability clause just so the rest of the bill can move forward. And the bill already had, and I would like to change the effective date to June 30th, 3000. With that, I'd like to move it out as a House Draft 2. Questions or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 389 SD1 HD1 with further amendments. Any reservations or noes? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. On the final measure, Senate Bill 1230, I appreciate all the testimony that came in on this. Members, you remember that we had passed out our version of the concealed carry weapon license bill, House Bill 984, moved over to the Senate. They are working on it now. Moved out of the first committee, it's now in the second committee. We analyzed the work that the Senate did on HB 984. We analyzed Senate Bill 1230. We also looked at the City and County of Honolulu draft ordinance or bill that they passed out of council that the mayor is considering signing now. And I've had conversations with the other counties and with the attorneys general. Based on all those conversations and reading the testimony from people who are here, Mr. Yukutake and others, I prefer the House Bill 984. My recommendation is to delete the contents of this measure, insert the contents of House Bill 984 HD2 with some additional amendments that we've worked on with the Attorney General that this would be statewide. This would be 4 years, as was in our original bill. This was written so that it would comply with the Bruin decision and also rely on additional case law that has occurred since then. Our list of sensitive places, it's clear we would lay out that this applies only to a licensee, not any person, since we want to make it clear that it will be a misdemeanor to have a concealed carry weapon license and bring a gun to a sensitive place. It's already a felony to carry a gun in these places without a license, so we want to make that distinction clear and only apply this to people who have obtained their license. Sensitive places, we've changed those slightly for clarity and to conform with provisions of the Honolulu City and County Ordinance, Bill 57. And so we've made a few changes in that. For example, all public library property, including buildings, facilities, meeting rooms, spaces used for community programming, adjacent grounds and parking areas. For the university, we've added research facilities. And for campuses of public schools and child care facilities, we specifically said, but not including a private residence at which education is provided for children who are all related to one another by blood, marriage, or adoption, and not including a dwelling when not used as a child care facility, because we have these around the state. We also are including, we have language in there that it's also a sensitive place with any shelter, residential, or programmatic facility operated by a government entity or charitable organization serving unhoused persons, victims of domestic violence, or children, including children involved in the juvenile justice system, and including adjacent parking areas. We've added to the public transportation and transit on a recommendation to include paratransit vans and bus shelters and terminals, but not including bus stops located on public sidewalks. And we made it clear that we added a preemption clause so that the provisions in this section apply statewide, and any county provisions that are inconsistent would be preempted by this law. And I want to note that my own mayor, Mitch Roth, had made it clear that it would be best to have one set of rules across the whole state instead of 4 sets of rules. And then we made some other changes in here to clarify that violation of, if there's a violation of one section, that it's the same, it's considered a petty misdemeanor. For example, if you leave an unsecured firearm in a vehicle unattended, we clarify that that violation of that section is a petty misdemeanor. In the original bill, it was a misdemeanor, and that would have created conflicts in penalties, and it would have invited a legal challenge. We made the same thing with unlawful conduct while carrying a firearm. As a petty misdemeanor, it was a misdemeanor. That was a conflict, so we've corrected that. And basically, we've made it clear that on private property, the private property owner makes the decision. What we've listed here, our provisions are only for private property open to the public, such as commercial properties. Does not include private residences. And then one final is we've added a new section crafted by the Honolulu Police Department, which makes it a petty misdemeanor to brandish or open carry a gun when you have a concealed carry weapon license. We also added a provision about the $150 license application fee being waived upon a showing of financial hardship to strengthen the legal defense in potential litigation. So those are the highlights of the amendments. So it's HB 984 HD2 with those additional amendments. I would like to put in a clean date effective upon approval and move that out to finance. Questions or concerns, members? First to Representative Souza.
Chair, I appreciate all of the work that you guys have done on this bill. I'm still going to have to vote no. Thank you.
Sure. No, people need to vote their conscience on this. I understand. No worries. Representative Ganadin, please proceed.
This is a thorough, thank you, Chair. This is a thorough and sophisticated piece of legislation. I think that you and your staff need to be thanked, as well as the Office of the Attorney General, attorneys throughout the state, who are employees of the federal and the state government, who have been working on this document for months. I think it's essential to protect residents from the kinds of tragedies that we've seen in the continental United States, happening at schools, at malls, at religious accommodations, and at places like this, the Hawaii State Legislature. I was personally taken aback when Mr. Rice flashed a gun to the committee during his testimony, and while he flashed a gun, he discussed a potential fact pattern of transporting a concealed firearm. My read of the bill on page 8 is that the discussion of transporting a concealed firearm is actually legal within the law. So that fact pattern was totally ridiculous. I think, again, all members in supporting this, who are supporting this, and just knocking on wood that we don't have any tragedies here in the state of Hawaii.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I really want to say that while we may disagree on things, I really don't want to be disagreeable and use any ad hominems, where I'm criticizing a person, but rather, we're trying to figure out the best way for us in the state here to meet the requirements under this new Supreme Court decision and protect the rights of those who want to be able to carry concealed weapons safely, because these are people that, to qualify, you have to be a good law-abiding citizen. So that's important, that we honor and respect those people who want to get a concealed carry license. At the same time, we also need to balance the interests of the public and public safety and public sentiment. And that's our challenge as legislators. But I want to say that I respect everyone who testified on all sides of this issue. And I will always hold them in high regard for taking part in this legislative process, because our legislation is improved by the testimony we receive from all sides on this one. So Mr. Yukutake, I want to acknowledge you. You've worked hard on your testimony in informing me, and others who have testified on this. I want to acknowledge them as well. Every Town for Gun Safety, the Attorney General, advocacy groups of all sides. I want to acknowledge your hard work on this, because our job is to balance out all these interests. And so thank you for your testimony on all this. Sorry for that little speech. Any other comments, questions, or concerns, members? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on Senate Bill 1230 SD2 with further amendments, noting the no vote of Representative Souza. Are there any other reservations or noes?
No vote, please.
A no vote registered for Representative Kong. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. There being no further business before this committee today, our meeting is adjourned.